Welcome to this free webinar hosted by Combined Knowledge. My name's Rob and I work full-time with Combined Knowledge as a trainer and content creator. So hopefully I'm a pretty good person to talk to or listen to about working with PowerApps. The idea of this session is something that I came up with a few months ago because a lot of our customers and people that we're talking to in the industry are quite confused at the moment around why or when should they use PowerApps. People often have an idea of the sort of things it can do, but they don't know what exactly to listen out for within their business, what sort of scenarios or problems to listen out for in the business that would then allow them to see an opportunity where PowerApps can help out. So this 1 hour webinar should go at least some way to helping you guys with that. Also, if you're completely new to PowerApps, then again, a lot of the content in this webinar should also be useful for you. So just to confirm my credentials and why I'm hosting the session. So I've spent more than 15 years now helping people all over the world understand Microsoft systems, specific experience that I have that's relevant to the particular product we're talking about today. I've been using SharePoint since 2007, including teaching people how to use every version of SharePoint since 2007, including writing books. I also, a while ago, did a lot of SharePoint Designer. Of course, that's not as popular nowadays, but I also used to do a lot of SharePoint Designer work, and InfoPath, which was another forms tool by Microsoft. And then also I've written several books around Nintex Forms products as well, and we've helped customers all over the world with those. So all that meant for me was when Microsoft brought out PowerApps, I was very, very excited and very keen to see what we could use it for and how our customers could use it. And it's probably been a little bit over a year now that I've been quite seriously involved in using PowerApps and a lot of other PowerApps related technologies as well. So I'm going to share some of my experience of that with you today. So before we take a look at PowerApps, and we're going to do a load of live demos, what I wanted to do is just kind of reassure people that PowerApps is a real thing and there's not that many barriers to get started with it. I want to kind of remove any worries that people might have about using PowerApps first, and then we'll go and look at the positive stuff straight after that. So got a little slide here with just 3 or 4 points on it. So some people worry. I'm naturally a worrier. I'm pretty good at worrying. Anything that's happening, whether I'm going to the cinema or we're traveling to a hotel, I can always think ahead and imagine what might go wrong. And that means I'm kind of careful about systems I use and where I go. So the good news is actually we don't need to worry about PowerApps. So let's start there. So one thing we might worry about if our end users or our colleagues are saying, oh, we want to use PowerApps, and we like the sound of it and we want to start using it tomorrow. One thing as a business we might worry about is that going to be expensive? Will it cost us money? So the good news is, and I've put a little note over on the right hand side here, actually if we're already using Office 365 or Dynamics 365 on most plans, so most variations of those two systems that are very, very popular now, it actually doesn't cost us anything extra to use the basics of PowerApps. And everything I'm going to do in the demo today, over the next hour, I'm going to do 3 different demos, we can do for free. So if we're already Office 365 users, we can do that for free. If you're not Office 365 users or Dynamics users, then it's going to start costing you money, and typically you pay per user per month. So if you don't have Office 365, you can buy PowerApps effectively as a standalone product, and then you're going to pay per user per month. So I'm not going to go into the cost right now, but the main thing is for a load of the people that we're working with and a load of our potential customers, they get access to PowerApps for no extra cost because they already have either 365 or Dynamics. The next barrier then, are PowerApps difficult to use? If I'm thinking of the end user, if I build an app for them and I give the app to an end user, so a person working in a data center or a person on reception or a doctor or a vet at the zoo, if I give them an app, will it be hard for them to use? If I've built it for them, can they use it? The good news is the whole idea of apps is they're very, very easy to use. So the consuming them and using them is very, very easy. Typically, that's because when we build an app, we design it to do one thing really well. So if I build an app to allow me to view information, that's what it will do really well. If I design an app to allow me to submit data and send it to a database, the app will do that really well. So it's almost that these apps are very deliberately designed with normally one or a small number of goals in mind. So if you think about the apps that you use on your phone or your tablet devices, or even something like a Windows 10 PC, hopefully we can kind of see from that previous experience that apps are designed to be easy to use. So that hopefully will be the same for the Power Apps that we build today. So apps are very much designed to be easy to use. There's a slightly different question there is, well, what about building them? What if I want to actually build an app rather than just use one? Well, there's two different answers that we could give here, depending on how chirpy we're feeling, or perhaps how honest we're feeling. So the first answer is that it depends what you're trying to build with Power Apps as to how much time it will take and how difficult it will be. The good news is Power Apps contains multiple different wizards. So the wizards basically can do a lot of the work for you. So you could tell the system, for example, I have this spreadsheet or I have this database, please build an app for me. And it will go, okay, great, where's this system, what's your password? And then it will go away and build that app for you. And potentially the app that it builds, you could use straight away. You don't have to do anything else, you could just use it straight away. So in that situation where you want something fairly simple, something fairly basic, just based on existing data, you could have a Power App within minutes, or probably not minutes, even seconds. It could be that quick. On the opposite end of the scale, if I want to build an app that's completely custom, and I find that none of the wizards really do what I want, you could quite easily spend several hours building a big, complicated app. So you start to feel a bit more like a developer at that point. And yeah, potentially you could easily spend several hours building an app. And some of the people I've been working with, I have seen them spend, in fact, several days building an app. Partly that was because they hadn't built any apps before in Power Apps and they were just getting used to it. So probably today, if they sat down and went to build the same thing again, they could probably build it in a few hours rather than a few days. So part of the time is the learning curve. Yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve there. So I can help you with that a bit today. I can share with you some of my insight. So those are the barriers. So that's the bad news. All the rest of what I'm going to show you now is the good news. Let's go for the good news. So there's this idea of Power Apps in the real world. I'm going to show you 3 different demonstrations today, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to describe as 3 different types of app that you can build. The 3 types that I've listed here, this is not how Microsoft talk about Power Apps. This is just from my experience of working with customers over the past year or more, specifically within Power Apps, and seeing what they're actually building with it. So I've seen, for those customers, their initial ideas, I've helped them understand the product, and then I've seen them actually start to build and use these apps within their businesses. So to me, there seems to be 3 types of app that people are building. So let me just explain these. And again, this is basically in my own terminology. This is not official Microsoft terminology. So the first type of app that I started to see people building, and it's probably of the 3 the easiest to build, is what I would call a reference app. Okay, so for example, one of my friends is an engineer, and as part of his engineering, one of the things he does is sells air conditioning systems. There's a lot more to it than that, but let's say there's air conditioning systems. And let's say that there's 20 different air conditioning systems that he sells. So what he wanted to do was on his iPad, he wanted to be able to sit with a customer in their office and on his iPad have something that looks really nice, an app that's really simple but really good professional look to it. And he wanted to be able to scroll through these 20 different systems. And as part of that, he wanted to show people pictures of these air conditioning systems. He wanted to have maybe the dimensions of them. So how big were they if they were thinking about fitting them into their offices or into their research labs, wherever the air conditioning was going. And he didn't really want to edit the data. Yeah, he just wanted to have something quite beautiful, very professional looking, that he could sit down and he could use as a reference material. Instead of having a PowerPoint slide deck or an Excel spreadsheet, he wanted something that looked really professional. So what we were able to do for those guys was create what I would call a reference app. So the data in that app doesn't change very often. And I'm going to build one of those and show you one of those in a moment. One of the cool things with a reference app is I could build it and then I could distribute it very, very easily to perhaps 100 people within the business. So I could say, right, who's in our business that needs this app that they can show to customers and use to see product specs? I could build it. It might take me 10 minutes to build it. It might take me another 5 minutes to distribute it to 100 people. So then from their mobile devices, they can get to that data. So that's one of the apps I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you how to build, hopefully, quite a beautiful looking reference app. The one I'm going to build, I'm going to spend about 5 to 10 minutes building it. And that's it. It will be live. I'm going to go from start to finish from between 5 and 10 minutes. So hopefully that sounds interesting. If you think in your businesses, right, what do we do? Where do we have lists of information for reference? Potentially this kind of first demo is going to be good for you guys. I'm also going to demo 2 other apps. So let's just mention those before we start building the first one. So the second one I'm going to demo is a database app. So as the name suggests, the idea is we already have an existing database and we want to have an app. So an app, in this case, what we're going to do is a data entry form for adding new items to our database. Also, that same app can be used for editing existing items in our database. Because I'm from a SharePoint background, and a lot of our customers at the moment are customers that we work with in SharePoint as well as in Office 365 and Teams and other places, my database that I'm going to demo from today is a SharePoint list. So it is a SharePoint list. Potentially the technique that I'm going to use, or a variation of it, you could use for other databases as well, but I'm going to go from a SharePoint list. So that's another thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how to take an existing database and then create an app to use for data entry and updating items. And in our example, it will be based within SharePoint. One of the things that's different between the first and second example is that second example I'm going to use within the browser. So people are going to fill that in within the browser. Why am I going to do that in the browser? Well, the first example, we're going to make it work for a mobile phone or tablet. So it just gives us a bit of variety. So the reference app, I imagine people don't even have their laptop with them. They want to be able to show customers the data, so having it on their phone or tablet's the way forward. The database app, the database that we're going to connect to is something that people would access in the browser. So it makes sense that I'm going to build an app that they can also use in the browser. So I'm just thinking about different business scenarios and where people would be and what their situation would be. I'm building apps in the appropriate places for use within different devices and different browsers. Yep. So that's what the second one's going to be. The second one we're going to spend about, again, maybe 5 to 10 minutes building, not too much more than that. Again, there's going to be a wizard that's going to do part of it for me. There's also going to be a wizard that will help me customize the way it looks. Not in terms of the color scheme as such, but more in terms of the way the data is positioned on the page. So even in that second example, we're going to use wizards to help us do that. It's going to save us loads of time. And then the third type of app that I'm going to show you is what I'm just calling an ultimate app. What's cool about the ultimate app, basically you can make apps that can do anything. So for example, we might have data that's stored in 3 different databases, and at the moment we have no way of seeing it all in one place. Wouldn't it be cool if I could build an app that can talk to all 3 of the databases and actually display the data combined together on my screen? Also, the Ultimate app can make use of our devices and the components within our devices. So for example, the mobile phone, I've got an iPhone that I'm going to do a couple of the demos from this afternoon. My mobile phone has a camera, a microphone, it has a GPS location. Also, my phone knows which way it's pointing in terms of north-south, and my phone knows whether it's being held horizontal or vertical. My phone can tell whether I have a internet connection or not currently. In the Ultimate app, we can make use of all of that and more. So the third example there, I'm not going to build all of that because, as you can appreciate, that would take more than 15 minutes to demo. But the idea of the Ultimate app to me is you can literally start with a blank screen and you can build whatever you want using a variety of data sources, including data about your user who's signed in and the device that they're using and databases around them. Potentially the Ultimate app, not everyone's going to care about that. They'll be like, oh no, I don't really want to do that. That's for a developer to do. Other people will be like, wow, that's cool. So potentially some things that we've been getting done externally at the minute by a developer might mean that we can do some of that stuff in-house now. So that Ultimate app is definitely pushing the boundaries of what a super user or a power user could do today compared to what used to need a developer, even just 6 months ago or a year ago. So hopefully one or all of those scenarios sounds interesting to you, and Time permitting, which we've got 45 minutes left for the session, we're going to go through all of those. So let's go for this first one as a demo then. So just to confirm, the first demo that I'm going to do for you today is this reference app. So the key things to look out for here as I go through the demo, I'm going to start off with a blank app rather than using a wizard, so you can see what it looks like when we first get started with nothing. The data that I'm going to bring in for my reference app is actually going to come from an Excel spreadsheet. So if you already have things like product specifications and prices, or service information, for services that you provide as a company, we can actually import that data straight from Excel very, very easily. I'm going to show you how to do that right now, and that can become our data for the app. So actually my friend, the engineer with the air conditioning requirement, his data was in an Excel spreadsheet. So he already had it in Excel. So that meant that half the work that we needed to do was already ready. One of the other cool things just to keep an eye out for with this is when we bring our data in from Excel, if you've got images, so photographs that are stored online, we can actually reference those images and use them within our app. So look here, you can see I've got an images column with www and a load of different addresses. So that is actually going to convert to pictures potentially within our app. Okay, so the data is going to come in from Excel, and it can include things like pictures, dates, times, all sorts of things. Also in this example, I'm going to view the results on my mobile device. What's nice about that is sometimes people say, I want to build an app, but I don't really have a database or a data source. I just want an app that's on my phone and there's no connections to it. I just want the app to be on my phone. Part of why people might want to do that is it's perhaps the cheapest way of doing things. Having other data sources can cost money, so the cheapest way is perhaps to not have data sources. So I don't need SharePoint, for example, or Microsoft SQL. Yeah. Another benefit of having no external data sources is this app, out of the three, is the one that's most likely to work when we're offline, because all of the information that the app needs to function, all of that information would be in the app. So even if we're offline, the data's there, it's available to us. What I'm also going to do, just to finish this demo, is I'm also going to show you how you would then share this app with other employees in the same business. So that's the plan. Okay, so let's take a look. If I switch over to my demonstration environment, so I already loaded up my demonstration environment over here. I've already logged into Office 365. All the demos I'm going to do today are going to be from Office 365. When I'm logged into Office 365, I can click the PowerApps icon and I can jump into there. And because I've not been into there for about half an hour, it's just having to think about who I am. And then in a couple of seconds, it's going to let me in. Having a think. There we go. Thank you very much. So next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to start from blank. Okay, so this is probably the hardest way to start building an app. There are other wizards and pre-designed templates, but potentially from a learning point of view, and also for what I want to build, a blank actually is a great way of doing it. Blank app. So that literally means I'm going to build everything. For the blank app, I either can say I want it to be designed for a phone, so kind of narrow and tall, or I want it to be designed for what's now being called a desktop, or used to be called a tablet, which is basically a much larger screen area, which by default is landscape rather than portrait. So because I'm going to demo from a phone with this one, I'm going to go for the phone option and choose to make the app. And just to confirm today as well, I'm just using a normal Office 365 E3 license. So this is just an E3. It's kind of a middle of the road license. It's not the top end super duper license. I'm just using an E3 because for most of our customers, that's round about where they are. So some of the customers have more expensive license, some of them have cheaper license, but E3 is the middle of the road one that represents what, from all the people we work with, that's where a lot of them tend to be. Around about E3. So again, I'm demoing based on normal things. I've not set up anything super duper to try and cheat and make it better than normal. Okay, so that's the first thing. So I've got this blank app. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some data. So I'm going to bring in some data, and that data I'm actually going to drop into a gallery. So how do I do all that? Well, there's this area called Insert, and there's this thing called a gallery. Gallery is amazing for reference apps. If you want to have an app that looks beautiful, where you can show a whole variety of information, such as products or services, and you want it to look great, a gallery is a great place to go. So, so I'm going to insert gallery. For now, I'm going to say the gallery is going to be, let's say flexible height. Let's do that, and you'll see what that means in a moment. Basically, that means I could have some products, for example, if it were products, where there's a load of information, and the gallery is able to grow really big for that product and show loads of information. And other products we might not have much information about at all, so the gallery is able to squash down and be really small for those products. So this is good where we've got varying amounts of information for each product. So that's what I've gone for right now. So that's going to sit in here. And at the minute, it already tries to look good. So it's already going to sit there sort of thinking, hey, look at me, I'm nice. If I just press the little preview at the top and just show you, imagine that on my phone, and I'm going to demo it from my phone in just a moment. You can see here what we've started to get. So if this was a product and a product description, and then down here another product and a product description. So you can see we're starting to get the kind of framework of what we might want. So already we've got that framework. We've got this nice scroll bar. We can scroll just on the touch screen as well, and we'll be able to bring our data in. It's just a quick start. So the gallery is a really nice object that we can work with. If I go and have a look, if I click on the gallery, so if I click back on him there and go and have a look at the data, which again is a clickable link in here, what I'm going to find is up at the top here, let me just zoom in and show you this because it's really important. We've got this thing called the data source, and at the minute it's brought in some example data called a custom gallery sample. Basically it puts that in there just so we can see what it will look like when we've got some real data in there. But I'm ready to bring in my data now. So if I click on the drop down and choose to add another data source, this is how I'm going to load in my reference data, my products, my services, whatever the data is that I want to make available within the app. So I'm going to go add data source, and it's going to offer me quite a few. So to keep it simple for now, we're going to say that the data that we're going to bring in doesn't change very often. In fact, let's say the data changes once a year when we have new information. So because the data only changes once a year, we're just going to bring in a set of data from Excel. And then one of the benefits of that is that it's going to embed the data in the app. And that's what's going to make it work when we're offline. Yeah, that's going to be part of the beauty of that. Okay, so let's bring in this static data. Let's grab that. Okay, so I just need to browse for my data because I have been setting up a few demos for you guys today. I've ended up with a load of folders. So where is he? There he is. Can't see it for looking. So that's there, and then there, and here we go. So what's happened is it remembered the last folder I put data into, same as Word and Excel does. So in here, I'm actually going to grab something that's not products or services. I've got some data about dogs, and let me just show you if I select that first. Let's just grab that. I've got some data about dogs because obviously everyone knows dogs are better than cats. Of course, everyone knows that as a fact. So I've got some data about dogs. So the spreadsheet that contains the dog data actually has two different tables in. So if you're in Excel, you can go insert table, and basically when you do that, it identifies an area of data as being a table. It switches on things like sorting and filtering, and it also means that you can then use the data easily within PowerApps and Power BI and some other systems. So if you got to this stage and it told you beep, that spreadsheet has no tables in, all you'd need to do is minimize this for a second, jump into your spreadsheet and just go insert table when you're clicked somewhere in your data. It will give the table a default name of table 1. You can rename it, but for the sake of what we're doing today, we don't need to. So that's the only preparation really. I just have a simple spreadsheet that already has tables in. I'm going to connect to the table. Wow. So the good news is it comes straight in. Let me just show you what the spreadsheet looked like just to remind you. So back here, this is a screenshot of the exact same spreadsheet. So we had the names of the dogs, the breed, an image. These images are just stored online. So these are just images from different websites. So if I had my own images, I can just put those images online. I can store them somewhere. It needs to be somewhere that ideally doesn't have a password to access. So if your company has a website, you could ask whoever looks after your website to put those pictures, those images into a website. It needs to be somewhere that ideally is always available. So when people load up the data, they get their images. If there's not many images and you would rather embed them within the app, that's possible as well. At the moment, what's happening is the app is looking to the internet to get these images, but there is other methods. So one way or another, we can definitely use pictures and logos and branding as well within our apps. Okay, so those were just web addresses, and look what it did already. It actually went and swapped them out for the appropriate image. It did that already. I didn't even ask it to. I suppose we could say I did ask it to because I told it to use a gallery, and it's actually the gallery that's doing all this. Okay. So hopefully that looks kind of good. And in fact, if I just hit play, I know it's not products. I could have got pictures of air conditioning systems, but for me, that's not as interesting. So I thought it's kind of the end of the week for most of us. We'll do dog pictures. But it could have been anything. So let's go back for a second. So you might think, well, it's okay, but the data doesn't look right. Like the pictures are good, but wouldn't it be nice if we had more text or different text? So again, over here, this wizard can help me with that. I can click where it says data, and in here I can just switch some things around. So at the moment, what have we got here? Title 1 is showing as breed. So we could swap that out. So instead of title 1 being breed, we could show the notes. So you can see that was the notes about the dogs. Maybe if some of these look a bit big, I could click on them and resize them. And when I resize this top one, it actually resizes all the others as well. So you can see that's dynamic. And also notice that in the preview here, as I'm changing things, it's changing real time. Maybe this here I want to move. Let's grab that and move it up a bit. And I don't really have a pre-scheduled plan with this. I'm just kind of moving things till it looks about right. So let's say that's there, and we hit play, and you can see again everything's dynamic. Okay, so hopefully you can imagine that could be any data. Right, I don't want to do too much more with this one because we've got two others to show you. But what we saw there was we could start with something that was blank. We could insert a gallery. The gallery then allowed us to bring in a data source from here, and away we go. And pretty quickly we could have a reference app. We could make this way better, but for our first demo, hopefully it looks pretty good. Let me just show you what that looks like on my phone. How would I make this available on my phone? Well, I could go File, I could go Save. So let's call this Demo 1, and let's call it Dogs. This is going to save to the cloud, so that this is not tied into the laptop that I happen to be using today. So up that goes to the cloud. And what I could also do is at this point I could go Share. So I know one of my colleagues is pretty keen on dogs. He's got his own dog as well. So what I might do is, since my colleague here is on the same tenant as me, so he's in the same business as me, it's actually really easy for me to share this with him as well. So I could go ahead in here and I could type in my colleague, which is Chris. He'll be excited. He's actually, I think he's in the session today, so he'll be ever so excited to get a name check. I don't really trust Chris with PowerApps. He's a bit heavy-handed. His ideas are often different to mine as to what would look beautiful in a PowerApp. So what I'm going to do is, although I want him to be able to use the app so he can go in and look at it, to look at the dog data, I'm just going to allow him to use it. So that now means if he logged into his phone and he went into the PowerApps app on his phone, he'd have this app available now. So I have it because I saved it, and I get it when I save it, and then I shared it, which meant it was available for Chris as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize that for a second, and I'm just going to switch over to my phone. So bear with me a second. Let's just see if this will load up. Yeah, there we go. So slight delay because I'm connecting through a different network, but what I've got now is my phone. So hopefully you can see my phone on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up PowerApps. So I already downloaded the PowerApps app on my device, which happens to be an iPhone. So if I go into PowerApps and I just refresh this, so I'm just going to do a refresh. And what we should find is this is going to arrive pretty quickly for me. So down at the bottom, look, there it is, Demo 1 Dogs. That's our new one. And I'm just going to click to open that up. And there we go. So within within a few minutes, let's say, if you took all that talking out, I literally could have built that and had it on my phone, I think, within 3 minutes. I don't even think it took any longer than that. I know the data that I put in wasn't strictly work related, but it gives you an idea. Okay, so for me, a reference app, we could make these better. We could have them bigger and more data, and but the ideas are there. Yeah, the idea is there. So that for me is the first type of app. And bear in mind, I even shared that with my colleague as well within that time that we took. So that for me is one type of app. So let's get rid of that for a moment, and let me just unshare my phone again, so it's not going to flicker around. So let's take a look then at another example. Let's take a look at another. Let's get a little bit more ambitious with this one, and we'll kind of keep getting more and more ambitious as we go through. So we could make reference apps. So that's pretty good. Hopefully you already have ideas of how within your business that could be useful to your people. Next thing then we're going to do is an app connected to a database. So for me, my database, or my favorite database for the past few years, is SharePoint. So I'm going to use a SharePoint list as my database. Potentially we could use all sorts of databases with PowerApps. That even can include on-premises databases, not just online databases. But for now, let's keep it simple because we've only got an hour. So we're going to go for a SharePoint online list, and we're going to build, or I'm going to build an app for that. If anyone's wondering, oh, is this kind of like InfoPath used to be? Yes, very much so. So where in SharePoint specifically, Microsoft used to recommend we use InfoPath to build data entry forms and data edit forms. Then where InfoPath is being phased out, then this second demo is going to represent what we would have done in InfoPath and now can do with PowerApps. So some key things to look out for in this one. I'm going to be starting from a SharePoint list that I've built already. At the end of this, I'm going to demo it from the web browser. So I'm actually going to use it in the web browser, and it's going to be highly integrated, completely integrated with SharePoint Online. Yeah. So I'm not going to have to download an app onto my phone. I can just do this in the web browser. So if most of your employees do not have mobile devices, potentially you could still use PowerApps because you can use them in the web browser on your PCs, laptops, whatever you've got. Okay, so that's what I'm going to go for. So I have a link here, which hopefully is just going to save me a little bit of time. So let me just jump into this link. So the link is going to take me straight to where I'm going to build my second PowerApp. So if I show you at the moment what I've got, so I've pre-created a list, or also known as an app. This is tricky, isn't it, in terms of terminology, but let's describe this for the sake of today as a custom list that I've built in SharePoint. And I've gone through and I've added a series of columns. So this is something which, again, a lot of our customers deal with. A lot of our customers have fleets of vehicles that they deal with, so leased vehicles. Some of our customers might have upwards of 1,000 vehicles if they're in logistics, or even if they just have, their average employee has a company car or a lease vehicle. So that's what I'm going to do for this example. The data again really could be anything, but for now I'm going to pretend these are leased vehicles that we're dealing with. And what we're trying to do is build a custom form for adding and editing items. Why would we build a custom form? Well, let me show you the standard one first. If I'm here in SharePoint and I go new item to add something in here, this over here is the standard Microsoft form. Actually, it's not bad, is it? For those of you that are used to using SharePoint 2007 or SharePoint 2010 or any of the older versions of SharePoint, this actually is a big improvement. Now we're in SharePoint Online. The data entry forms are pretty good. However, we don't have an easy way just in the browser without using PowerApps to modify these. So imagine we like the form. It's not awful, but our employees have said, oh, what we'd prefer is perhaps if all of these fields here were actually a bit higher up, and then maybe these fields here were just a bit smaller. So effectively, we'd have two columns, and everything will be at the top rather than it being one column and being tall. So the users may have a preference. Also, if we're struggling for room here, imagine if you had to scroll down again, being able to take the content and push it into 2 or 3 columns on the form could be good. We might also want to put more business logic into the form. At the moment, when people are in here, there's already some logic and validation, but it's limited. We want to be able to add more validation. We may also want to add branding. So logos, for example, we might, yeah, there's probably, I don't know, 40 or 50 things that I've heard a user or customers ask us to change about these forms. And actually, the easiest way to change these forms now is to swap this form out for a PowerApps form. That's what I'm going to do. So how do I do that? Well, the good news is we can click on this little arrow here, and it says, right, what do you want to build here? What is it you're trying to do? What I just described, the equivalent of using InfoPath on the older systems, is customized form. That will let me swap out that form that we just saw on the right for a form that I've built using PowerApps. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. The other option that we've got here, which is also just worth calling out as well, is we can also create a mobile phone app. And I say mobile phone, but I mean mobile device app. So if I wanted to be able to view this data, edit this data, contribute new items to the data, or delete this data from my phone or tablet, I'd go and create an app. And that would mean without logging into SharePoint and without even using my laptop, I could manipulate this data in every way. So I don't want to do that for now. I want to do the other, which is the InfoPath one. Why am I going to do the InfoPath one? Well, that's the newest one. If we were doing this demo at the same time last year, I couldn't have done what I'm about to do. This is something that is relatively new. So I'm going to sort of focus on that just because it's something that a lot of people still don't really know that we can do. So let's take a look. Let's go with that. That's what my thinking is. I'm going to go customize forms. The good news is it's going to give me a wizard. So these wizards, as we've seen with things like the gallery wizard, basically is going to take a lot of the effort out of this for me. And this is how I'm able to do 3 demos in an hour, including a load of talking as well. So I'm going to have to just bear with it a few seconds whilst it builds this for me, but it won't take long. Oh, another little thing, look, I don't know if you noticed, guys, whilst this is happening, where am I doing all this editing? I'm in a web browser. So that everything we did so far, I didn't have to download any tools to do it. I just did everything in Office 365 in a web browser. So that's pretty cool. The old method using InfoPath, I would have had to install InfoPath on my local device to be able to build the forms. With PowerApps, we can actually build using PowerApps just in the browser. And actually, that, from my experience so far, has been the best experience. Rather than downloading any clients to build stuff, I'm able to build stuff straight in the browser. Partly what that means is I can just jump on any computer that I happen to be using that day. So yesterday, for example, I was using a computer that a customer had given me to use for the last 3 days. Didn't matter. If I needed to just jump onto one of my forms and just update it, really made no difference. I could be on any computer, any device, and away we go. So it gave me the freedom that in different situations, there was no hassle. It was never one of those, I'm afraid I am one of those people that rolls my eyes a lot and sighs a lot. You know, like, oh goodness, why is this so hard to do? Good news is PowerApps generally doesn't do that to me. PowerApps makes me feel kind of happy. On my scale of things, this is me being happy, by the way. Okay, right, so that's finally done. We can stop filling for time. It's built it. Right. Look at this. It doesn't look great. So I need to fix it a bit. What it's done is all the fields that it thinks are important, it's brought in. So modified, created, created by, modified by ID. I don't care about any of those. And I think actually to show them on a data entry form for a user, it's probably just going to confuse them. Let's say that I don't really want any of that. And also, one of the other things I was excited about was that we could do this in a 2-column format. So I wanted some of this stuff to kind of slide up to here and some of this stuff just to slide left a bit. And it's not done any of that. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've got some work ahead of me now. The good news is there is a wizard that will help me. Yeah, there is a wizard built in that will do all of that for me. So on the left, I'm going to click on this form object. So that's selected. Sometimes if you're in a Power App and you're struggling to select the thing you want, just use the selection window on the left. Just click on the object, and then that's the easiest way of selecting an object or a part of an object. So that's a good tip. Then over here on the right, I'm going to click where it says data and vehicles. And look what we can do. So first thing I'm going to do is get rid of all the stuff that I don't like. And how easy is that? Well, look at these tick boxes. Untick, untick, untick. And as I'm doing that, look, they're disappearing. So I can go through and basically zap all of these. there used to be some products that I worked with, and these ticks were little eyes. They were little like eyes, and you'd poke them in the eye, and they would disappear. I used to love that. So it's not as exciting here. They're just little check boxes. But I have seen products where you press them, and it's a little eye, and I don't know. Maybe it's just me that thought that, but anyway, okay. So let's have a look. So we've done that. That looks good now, I think. But I still don't have my 2-column format. So this is where a lot of people then would start grabbing these things and moving them around and spend the next 20 minutes trying to get them to line up. You don't need to in PowerApps. Look at this. I want 2 columns. Oh, you've done it for me. Thank you very much. So these little wizards, so to me, that's what these are. These little things where I'm going data, and then it's going to do this stuff for me. And I don't really need to invest much time or effort for everything to be perfectly lined up, equally spaced, everything looking nice and neat, really for very little effort at all. If you're someone that likes to do things the hard way, if you've got a lot of spare time on your hands and you're always just thinking, oh, I wish I had more stuff to do, and you want to move these boxes one at a time, you can do. It's possible that you can click on things, and then there's this little padlock here, and if you press the padlock, that tells the wizard to leave you alone, and in which case it will bow out and say, okay, on you go, you do everything yourself, at which point you can then position everything, exactly as you want. But for me, if you've got half a day to build something and test it, the wizard is the sort of thing that's going to make that possible, rather than, oh, I need an extra 2 days because I spent half a day just lining stuff up. So hopefully that's looking pretty good. Just to kind of spice things up a bit, what I might do is just go screen, background image, and just go to add a background image. So I mentioned before that myself and Chris often don't agree on what looks good in a Power App and what doesn't look good in a Power App. One of the things that we had a pretty big falling out over a while ago was GIFs. He thinks that I'm a bit old-fashioned because I like GIFs, but he doesn't realize GIFs are trendy again. So if you've not seen GIFs before, it's these like animated pictures. So Power Apps, of course, and SharePoint Online and most of the kind of modern Office 365 systems all support GIFs again now, which I love. So this one's a little bit silly, but let's just grab him there. There he is. Look at him. So I didn't have to put him as a background, but it's just kind of showing you that we can do all sorts of different things. I'll do another one in a minute that's a bit more professional, but I love the idea that these apps that we're building within Power Apps can include sound, movement, all sorts of different things. And it can be super professional, of course, as long as you've got good judgment. That might be the bit I'm lacking, the good judgment. That could be my problem. Okay, so that's going to look pretty good in there. I'm just going to go ahead and just go in and file and save. Obviously, I've done a bit of work on that. I don't want to lose it. And I'm also just going to go ahead and hit publish. So there is a difference between saving and publishing. Publishing is basically go live. I'm ready for everyone to see this now. So I'm going to go publish. That's what's going to make it visible to other people. And there we go. So let's go back. See at the top left here, in this particular example, there's then this back to SharePoint, this little back to SharePoint thing. So I'm going to click on that. And I am heading back into SharePoint. There's no error messages, everything's nice and quick. It just kind of elegantly takes me back. And remember, all I did to get started was I was in a SharePoint list and I went customize forms. The actual form that it gave me straight away, you could have been forgiven for going, oh, that's no better than the one we had before. But obviously I've jazzed it up a little bit with a bit of animation, a bit of a GIF. And I've rearranged things based on my customers' requests. So then now if I go new, look at that. So I could fill this in. I don't really want to spend much time filling it in, but I'm going to fill it in just because I want to show you that it works. So what have we got here? Date picker. What else we got? Oh, we've also got so we've got 2 things here. We've got a date time picker, and we've got a the keyword is actually a what's the right phrase? A user and group column. User and group column. So the user and group column. Oh, this has just gone slow. That's annoying. So just because I made the mistake of saying, look how elegant and quick everything was. I made the mistake of saying that, and then it's gone go slow. So let's just try. For some reason, that date picker has just gone slow. Let's just try again. There we go. So the date picker should just let me go date, okay. But it has just decided that it's going to go on a go slow. So I'm going to give it 5 seconds just to work out whatever it's got to work out in the background. And hopefully it's going to clear off. Honestly, in every time I've demoed anything around this, the date has never ever played up. Obviously it knows I'm recording this one, so it's gone, you're going to say it's elegant and fast. I'm going to not do it then. Okay, let's try the users and groups one. So I think, again, I'm on the same system here as Chris. So if I start to type in Chris, he'll appear. I'm on the same system as several other users. So if I start to type in Ashley, he'll appear. And I didn't do anything special to make that work. It's just a user or group column, this column that I added here. So I'm not sure why the date field decided to play up there. There wasn't anything particularly special about it, but it's let me fill it in now. So if I hit save, and there we go. So I just wanted to show you that that works. Also, if I go to edit, edit, I just want to show you that we get that same form. So we could customize that further, but we don't have time today. But hopefully that gives you an idea. So our second example was an equivalent of using InfoPath against an existing database. And our database here was a SharePoint list. Hopefully, again, in your mind, you might be thinking, oh, we've got some SharePoint lists. That would be cool if we could do something similar with those. Okay. I can see there's a few questions coming in. What I'm going to do is go through and just finish off this last demo, and then I'm going to go through those questions, okay? I can see there's a few good questions coming in, so don't think I'm ignoring you. We'll run through those in a moment. So the third and final example for this particular session is what I was going to call this ultimate app. So for me, the ultimate app is going to take a bit longer to build, and I'm not going to build a whole big one today, but I'll show you kind of an idea that that I've just been working on today for some of the stuff we've been working on as a business recently. So to me, why is there an ultimate app? What could that do? Well, it could do literally anything. So it can make use of your device, so your GPS, your location, your camera, your microphone. We could use multiple data sources, so we could connect to Twitter, Facebook, on-premises databases, SharePoint on-premises, SharePoint online. We could connect to stuff in Dropbox. We could connect to stuff potentially in places like Salesforce, but that starts to cost a little bit more money. So depending on what you want to connect to, there can be charges. So definitely Salesforce, there's an extra license to connect to that. We could add more business logic, so when people are filling things in, we can keep them on the straight and narrow. We could also trigger something called flows. Really, in this session, we don't have much time to talk about flows, but just to give you an idea, if PowerApps is a front-end system, so it allows us to create a beautiful front end for capturing and viewing and interacting with data, Flow is very much a back-end system where we could automate processes. So for example, if we wanted to be able to add a new item to a SharePoint list, and based on that, we wanted to trigger a flow could then go out and seek approval for that new item in our SharePoint list. So it might email someone or send something to them as part of an app. That person would get a form to fill in to approve or reject and give feedback. So if you want to do kind of behind the scenes things like sending emails, making decisions, pushing data from one system to another, so taking data from Twitter to Facebook or SharePoint to Twitter or between all sorts of different business systems, including customer-facing stuff, not just internal, flows can do that really, really well. So we don't have time to do flow really in this particular session, but if you're building an ultimate app, often you'll have not just the app or multiple apps perhaps, but also potentially flows and some sort of a database like a SharePoint or something equivalent. Okay, so what are we going to do for the demo here of an ultimate app? Well, I've got something that I literally was just kind of thinking about before the session, and I started to do a mock-up of just this afternoon, just for like, I think about 10 minutes was all I spent on it, because it's an idea that I had for something that I think will be useful for some of our customers. Okay, so what is it? What is this? This is the start of an ultimate app for me. So what is this one? So this is something that recently we've been doing quite a few road shows with our customers. So for us as a training company, we basically go out. We might have hundreds or thousands of people within a given business that we need to visit and actually talk to them and help them learn about things and enthuse them about using their new computer systems, a lot of which for us is Office 365 and SharePoint Online and everything that goes with that. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if all the trainers that are working with a company, so if there's 7 of us or 6 of us working on a project, and then maybe a load of people within their business as well, wouldn't it be cool if they all had the Roadshow app on their device? So when we go out and we visit, so for example, I've spent the last 3 days with the customer on the South Coast. One of my colleagues has been up about 300 miles north of me in a few different locations with the same customer. So I thought, well, what did we want to collect? So it would have been nice to collect some photos from each location. So in my app, I want to have a way of taking photos and sending them straight back to their office immediately, just immediately. So I don't have to think, oh, I'll email them later on. I just want to be in an app, take some photos and send it straight back to their office, perhaps into a SharePoint library that those guys use all the time. So they already have a SharePoint Online site, so I could send it back to there. Wouldn't it be nice as well if when I'm in delivering some sessions and there's common questions that keep coming up, frequently asked questions we call them, wouldn't it be nice just for me to write those down and send them into a central location so that either someone can be coming back to us with what the answers are, or maybe I'm typing the questions and the answers and they're going straight to a database that all the users can see. And maybe it'd be cool if it stamped those with where they came from and who submitted them. So all the data, the kind of unique requirements for that roadshow, which is part of a training rollout, wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? So I started to build a mock-up of it here, and I just wanted to use this as an example of basically the starting point of an Ultimate app. And I literally spent about 10 minutes on this one, but it already works a bit. So when someone goes into the app, they get a welcome screen. So it says, welcome to the app. It shows them their profile picture in Office 365. So it automatically comes up with that. It shows them their name, so they know that they're logged in. They have a button to take a photo, and when they press that button, it takes them over here. And this is coming up with my other webcam now. On your screen, you might see the webcam as being a bit slow if I move around, but actually that's just because we're streaming through an online meeting. Actually, for me, as I'm moving, the camera is basically real time. So if I was pointing this at an audience or a room or a demo I'm doing, I could grab a picture right there. What I've done for this one is I've made it so that when I click on it, it grabs the picture. So it'll grab the picture. There we go. Look. So I get a preview of it. And if I'm happy with the picture, assuming I'm like, yeah, that's my good side, then I can send it straight back to the office, which in this case, I've just made a button that actually submits it back to a SharePoint library. So this picture would go straight back to a SharePoint library. The other button that I put in here was send a frequently asked question. So that one I've not built yet, but let me show you here. Basically, I can have another one of these screens, and on here, this is where it'll probably take me about another 10, 15 minutes, not much longer really, to make another SharePoint list or another database to connect to, establish here a form that they'd fill in, and then just a little submit button over here. And the way I'd imagined it is when I hit submit, basically it's going to take all this data, send it back to a central database. So anyone that's back in the office, sort of dealing with the strategy of the roadshow and collecting the data, they'd see it straight away. We could get it to email them as well, so they know there's a new item to go and look at. They might then press a button over on their system to take this frequently asked question and the answer to it, and maybe put it on their Twitter, on their Yammer, on their whatever. We can connect to all sorts of different things, all sorts of things. So this for me is the start of what could be an Ultimate app. So if I just show you what that looks like, if I go back to here and just share my screen again. Okay, so it's going to take a couple of seconds to come up, but we should see that now. So there's my phone. And then I'm going to go back into PowerApps. And because I was wary of time in this 1 hour session, I already created that. And I already also went ahead and saved it as well. So I see it as an app. So my phone is just refreshing. There we go. So that's not a screenshot. Hopefully you can see that now. That's actually my phone. So if I try the take a photo, so imagine I'm on the roadshow now, I'm out and about. I can go take a photo. And I cheated a little bit because I wanted to have something to take a picture of. So I've already got my little Easter bunny here that was on my desk when I got here this morning. Definitely a perk of working at Combined Knowledge. The Easter bunny must live somewhere nearby. So if I press on that, and there we go. So that's taken a picture now. And then if I click on the button there, you see it says send to office. I'm just pressing on that with my finger, and that's sent. And then basically as a way of confirming to me that it's sent, it's navigated back away. So I could go take photo again. And this is going to be a bit like Inception, isn't it? If I point it at itself, it's going to be upset with itself. But let's take one of those. Let's say that's a picture, so I'm going to send that to the office as well. And there we go. So hopefully you can see that, and literally that one took me about 10 minutes to do a mock-up of there. I put a background picture on it, which is just a bit nicer branding. I could have gone a lot further with that, but hopefully it just gives you an idea of what we can do there. So let me get rid of my phone again, because that's a bit distracting there now. And I just want to prove to you that that worked. Not that I'm sure you would doubt me, obviously, but let me just prove to you that it works. So I've got a link now to the SharePoint Online site where those photos were going back to. And I happen to do photos, but in theory it could have been all sorts of different things. So let's have a quick look in here. Oh, they've not landed yet. They've not landed yet, but they should do anytime soon. So what's happening behind the scenes is basically the photos come off my device, they trigger another process, and then that process converts them, and then they land in SharePoint. So they are going to land there. If they weren't going to land there, if there was actually a major problem on the device, it would have told me, and I'll just check on my device, and there's no error on my device. So if there were a problem when you kind of press submit and there was an issue, then it would tell me. So let me just give it a couple more seconds and refresh. No, still not arrived quite yet. So just because we don't really have much time, I'm not going to stay there. So I'm 100% sure those pictures are going to arrive. They've just not arrived quite yet. So they're going through, they're being converted, and they're uploading. So they are going to arrive there. These are some that I just did earlier today. So that they are going to arrive in there, but they just haven't landed quite yet. And we are just running out of time. So the Ultimate app potentially could do anything. So connect to different data sources, combine data, submit data straight back to people that are office-based from field workers. Yeah, and I was going to do a different demo. I was going to show you one of the Microsoft ones, but I thought, well, actually, this roadshow thing that we're doing at the minute, it would have benefited from an app. So I just started to do a mock-up of that, and I thought I'd show you that one. So hopefully that's interesting. Microsoft have a load of samples as well. Of what I would call Ultimate apps, where they also do lots of different things. So keep an eye out for the Microsoft ones. So we have just a few minutes officially before we sign off. So let me just run through a couple of other things that are useful for you guys to know. What if I'd had more time to show you stuff? What would I have shown you? Well, branding. So we could do all sorts of things with branding. We can do transparencies and all sorts of cool stuff. We can do rounded edges. We can use GIFs. We can also build stuff that can work offline as well. So some of the stuff that I showed you there only works online, but we could build apps that have the ability to detect whether they're offline or online and change the way they function. So that's something pretty cool. We could include things like audio and video. So that's cool as well. And in my head, something else we could build that would make these even better is user preferences. So imagine if a user comes in and they could set their favorite background color, they could set how the pictures look. So we could have built into it potentially the ability for a user when they go in the first time to set their preferences, and then for us to be able to offer them different choices based on that. Other tools that we could plug in, we already did some of these, but we could use SharePoint as a database, but we could also use loads of other things as databases as well. We could use Flow behind the scenes to automate things like approval processes and conversion of file types, all sorts of things we could do with that. We could also use gateways to connect to and push and pull data back and forth for on-premises databases. So the demo we did was SharePoint Online, but actually we could have done basically the same thing, or very similar things with on-premises databases, as long as we use a gateway, which is a special Microsoft tool. If anyone's interested in seeing kind of a full training course rather than just this 1 hour webinar, we at Combined Knowledge are hosting a whole series of training courses on PowerApps and Flow. They're going to be available online and in the classroom. So our classroom one runs in Leicestershire. So we have premises here where we get people together, and that's scheduled to run in May. We're also running online classes for PowerApps and Flow in different time zones. So we have American time zones and European time zones. So they prove very popular for our customers. If you want a discount, on those upcoming PowerApps and Flow courses, because you guys have attended the webinar today, then there is a discount code which is ZW20. So either you can give us a call, and I'll give you the phone number in a moment, or you can go onto our website and just mention when you're booking this webinar, and you don't have to remember the code, but if you mention this webinar or the code ZW20, then you can get a 20% discount off of the normal price, which is pretty good. Okay, so these are at the moment are amongst our most popular courses. So where people used to phone me and ask about SharePoint Designer and working with InfoPath, those days are kind of behind us now, and very much PowerApps and the Flow for a lot of our customers is really where things are at. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully this has proved to be a kind of a useful or interesting session. We've shown you 3 different scenarios, and we talked about a few different real world applications where hopefully PowerApps could be useful for you and your customers. So again, my name's Rob, and I do work here full-time at Combined Knowledge. So if you do have any questions basically about training, education, and understanding Office 365, then you can get hold of me on my email address. I travel around quite a lot, so my email address is probably the best way of getting hold of me, which is just rob@combined-knowledge.com. If you want to phone the office, so I'm not always in the office, but our office here at Combined Knowledge, I've also put the phone number up for that as well. So for example, if you're interested in booking a few people onto a training course, or if you wanted a private class where we come and work with you or one of your customers, then we can do that as well. So whatever's the easiest for you. So thank you very much. For those of us that have got a long weekend, enjoy your weekend. And then for those of you that have to work on Friday, commiserations, and it's not long till Saturday. So what I'm going to do now is, although officially we've overrun our time, I'm just going to run through the questions that came in. So let's take a quick look. We answered a few of the questions. So one question we've got is, can you share apps with external people? At the moment, we can't. So we know loads of customers have talked to Microsoft and said we want to be able to use our apps with external people. At the moment, we can't create an app in our tenant and allow other people to use it. What we can do is we could export that app. There's a process that at the moment is described as experimental, which means it's not fully supported, but it is available, where I could build an app in my tenant. I could download it, basically, the whole app, which can include the flows that support it if there are any. Then I could give that package that it creates over to a customer, and they can import it into their tenant. So we don't really have much else than that. Generally, these apps are designed for use within that tenant, but yeah, we can export them. I've had good experiences with that export. I've used it with a few customers recently where they've been having trouble, and they've tried to describe to me what they're doing, even in an online meeting, but it was easier for them to export it and send it to me. So you can export and import. That's how we're doing it at the minute. And even though it's experimental, so far when I've used it, it's been pretty reliable, and it's really fast as well. So there's a question there. When you publish to SharePoint, how do you control who has access to the form? At the moment, which was the second demo we did, right? So in demo 2, when we went and published, basically as soon as I publish, anyone that goes to the SharePoint list and they have access to that list and they go new item or edit item, they get that same form. So as far as I know at the minute, there's not a specific way of saying this form is for certain people. One thing we can do, however, with a PowerApps form is when someone goes into a PowerApps form, we can detect who they are. So in theory, it would be possible to do kind of a show hide type deal. So it'd be one form, but perhaps you hide certain fields depending on who logs in. I have built that in mobile apps, but I believe that would also work in a SharePoint list app as well. So we can hide and show things based on who the user is. So yeah, I think that's probably where we'd have to start from. Yeah. So it wouldn't be a whole separate form, but we could kind of show or hide parts of it. And then there's a question there around the photos, which was the third demo. Could we have taken multiple photos and sent once only? Yeah, I believe we could. I want to confess and say I've not done that before, but I believe we could. And the reason why is the process that I was using behind the scenes to send the photo was I'd captured the photo in a gallery, which was an object. I captured it in a gallery, and then I was just grabbing it from the gallery. So I'm pretty sure that with a little bit of changes, like probably about another 5-10 minutes of changes to that third demo, I could get it to send 20 or 30 pictures using a very similar technique. And part of what makes that possible is that, again, we're sending the data using something called flow, and flow supports the use of multiple values and loops. Yep, so that's what I'd be using to make that possible. Yep, flow can have multiple values and we can loop, and in my mind that combination would work. Yep. Has anyone else done that before? I'm not sure. I've not seen anyone else doing that, but based on all the combinations of things I've seen and done before, then yeah, I think we could do that. Excellent. So that is, I think, all the unanswered questions that had come in earlier that we've just kind of gone back through. So thank you again very much for everyone's interest.